I was going to ask you, this game has become really fun really quickly, this Liberty City game. And like you said, we can talk more about these in another pod, but I got to ask you this. You have the natural City West rivalry, right? I mean, that goes back to the 60s. I think West opened in the 60s, late 60s,
Yeah,
early
and
70s.
for people that don't, we both of us worked at the Press Citizen and worked in sports at the Press Citizen. I worked there starting in '97, and my main beat was high school football, and did a lot of stories on the history of the boot. And those teams were good, man. That's
Yeah,
when City and West were playing at a high level. Not that they aren't now, but that was different. They were kind of the teams to beat in the state for a lot of that
90s.
time,
Yeah,
and
that game was the game.
that was, I mean, that was really cool to be around. I've not been to a City High Liberty game yet, so
So,
I'm not sure what that's like. I would think that the more natural rivalry is West and
right.
Liberty because you have the crossover there. But
Yes.
it's still Iowa City. I mean, it's still Iowa. I mean, if you were playing, one of these schools against Regina, it's still. I mean, it's the community. You're going to be.
Right.
You're going to be up for it.
Right. And that's what I was going to ask you. You've covered college for a long time. So
Right.
I'm looking, as I prep for this, I was like, all right, I'm going to impress Rob here with like drop this like,
You
this
always impress me.
similar college rivalry. So you're right. You have the old school West and City rivalry that goes back years, powers. Then you have the natural West City High or West Liberty split. That kind of natural rivalry.
Right.
But this City Liberty rivalry, they played right away. And West and Liberty didn't play, until this year when they were in the same class. But City and Liberty, first varsity game for Liberty's at City High. Super good game. City kind of jumps on them. Liberty comes back. City wins that one. Last year, it comes down to a field goal. Basically, as time expired, 23-20, back and forth game. But what I was going to ask you is, so all I could think was like, one of these has got to be like Florida State, Florida, and one of them's got to be like Florida State, Miami, or like what's the, because it's like you can't compare can't compare it to Iowa and Iowa State. There's only two schools, but it's like, what is that like? I'm like, what is this rivalry where you've got like the old rivalry? It's got to be something like that if you're going to compare it to like a college one, or is it like Ohio State and Michigan are rivals, and then this is like Michigan State or something like that?
Yeah, I like your Florida comparison. I really do. I think because, and having lived down in Florida for a time, it's very, very pronounced when you're a fan of one of those schools, and there is usually that round robin
Right.
where everybody's playing each other. So, yeah, I like that comparison. I mean, it can't be, but I think the key is what you said, Ryan. The key to a rivalry is having memorable games.
Great games. And the first two have been great. And this year should be really, really good too. I couldn't handicap that game right now.
Mm-hmm.
They're both 1-2. But that's what I think is seriously like. They have a trophy for it already. I think it's the Battle for Zeus, they call it. But they've kind of added that to. But like you said, all these kids know each other.
Right.
They play U sports together. They know each other. They see each other around. And that's the cool thing about any good rivalry if people handle it correctly, right?
Right.
I don't know if any rivalries are totally friendly. People use that, but if you handle it correctly, what's fun about it is when parents work together. When you go into the office and there's half the kids or half the office has Iowa State stuff on, half the stuff has Iowa on. You see those people. That's what kind of makes it fun, and I think that's what's fun about these rivalries is these parents work together. The kids know each other. They know each other from all sorts of stuff. They know siblings. But like you said, both games to start this thing have been fantastic. And one of these teams is going to have an opportunity to go into the playoffs feeling like at 2-2 after missing 3 weeks, should feel really good about where they're at, because I think both of them can win that opening playoff game. I think City High can win. Like I said, I really do. I think they're much improved. I think if they played 9 games this year, they're definitely going to have, they're going to push 5 win. I can't tell you their exact schedule, but they were going to win football games this year. And I think it's a matter of them playing their best at the right time, which is going to be difficult to do when you didn't play for 3 weeks. But they have the talent and the playmakers, I think, to win multiple playoff games.
And let's hope, kind of like you were talking about earlier with Linn-Mar, City was able to maybe knock off some rust last week and plays
Right.
better football this week.
Right. Exactly. And the same can be said for Liberty too.
Right.
We can segue into them since we're already talking about that game. I don't know what to make exactly of Liberty, Rob. I mean,
so they lost what? They lost to a good Cedar Rapids Prairie team last week. Make no mistake about that. Prairie's good. It was 48-14, but like you said, I'll let you take it away. I don't know how you gauge that type of game when Prairie had been continuing to play and Liberty hadn't.
and on top of that, Prairie runs the single wing.
Yeah.
Old school single wing.
Yeah.
If you look at the stats from that game, they had like 35 guys carry the football. I mean, it's like, and you never see it. And you can't practice for 3 weeks.
Right.
So they come back to practice on Saturday, and it's like, hey, guys, we're going to spend the first couple of days conditioning. And look, they have good coaches. They were, game planning. But it's like you got to spend some time just focusing on yourself. And then when you get into game prep mode, it's like, hey, by the way, we're going to play this team that runs an offense that no one else runs, that you've never played against, that you'll never play against again unless we play this team.
Right.
So that's why I said I don't know what to make of them. They played West High really well for a half. That game's 27-0, and West High has shown it's one of the best teams on this side of the state.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was at the game when they played Cedar Rapids Jefferson, which they had a lot of stuff. And Cedar Rapids Jefferson is struggling, don't get me wrong, but I covered that game on a Thursday night. They had a lot of things go wrong, Liberty did. They had some turnovers, they had some penalties. They had a lot of stuff go wrong, and I was really impressed by the way they finished that game. They gutted it out. Jeff got the ball back, had some momentum, chance to go down, win the game. I think they had it about their own 40. Again, that feels like it was 2 years ago. It was, a month ago, but they hadn't played in 3 weeks. And Liberty stepped up and got a pick on the first play of that drive. And you could just feel that's their first win as a 4A team. You could feel talking to those kids after the game. They're coming out of the locker room, and you just felt like a sense of I don't know if I'd say relief, but just a sense that they'd prove something to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, this could be a momentum building win for them. And then, they're not able to play for 3 weeks. And they had really tough games in that stretch, I think, of 3 weeks, if I remember right. I think they had Linmar in there. But I think they had maybe Cedar Falls and somebody else too. But they're a team that even after seeing them one time, I'm not positive what to make of them. They're working through some quarterback stuff. They didn't complete a pass the first 2 weeks. And then again, so that's not exactly what you want. Not exactly a good time to have a 3 week break. Like, there, of course, never is a good time for that. But they've played City really well the last 2 years in season openers, considering that one of those season openers was their first varsity game ever. I like their defense. I think they're getting better up front, but they are, to me, a little bit like a lot of these teams on the eastern side of the state, where I don't know what to make of the entire eastern side of the state as far as they don't do strictly like the east-west split anymore for the playoffs.
Right.
But you have West High and Pleasant Valley at the top. I guess I'm assuming they're both unbeaten. And then you have a bunch of other teams, Cedar Rapids, Washington, Cedar Rapids, Kennedy, Bettendorf, both Dubuque schools. And Dubuque Hempstead's very good. They're probably maybe a little bit above those teams. Cedar Rapids, Prairie, where I just look at these. Some teams have missed some games because of opponents or because of themselves. I don't know how all that shakes out. I really don't. So it'll be interesting. Liberty's a team that I'm really excited to watch this week, and then their first playoff game, to see how far they've come from where they were at when I saw them, especially offensively, to see how, because I think they made some strides offensively against Prairie, just looking at the stats. I'm interested to see how far they've come from where they were at a couple weeks ago against Cedar Rapids Jefferson when I saw them. But I don't have a great read on them, kind of like I don't on City High, and truthfully, kind of like I don't on this entire side of the state as far as the hierarchy of where their teams are at. And I think that's kind of just you chalk it up to the type of season it's been, with not, like we talked about in the intro, not everybody playing a straight schedule the way that they have.
Yeah, it's a fragmented season, and like we talked about with City High, you hope Liberty got some rust off against Prairie. Should have confidence, as you said, playing City High, being as it's played City High tough the last 2 years. So it should go into Friday night with with confidence.
That really should be a great game. I mean, that's probably the game. Kennedy and West always play really good games. They're both really physical. But this is an exciting game. I think it's a great opportunity for both those teams. And like I said, they've played such good games the last couple of years. It's going to be really competitive, and it's just going to probably be a matter of who makes plays late, but which is what it's been the last couple of years. But that's quickly developed into a really cool rivalry. I love it.